Hey, Michael. Do you want to do a song or something? I don't know. Okay.
Hey, this is Frame Rate. I'm one of your hosts, Michael Swain. That's Abe Epperson.
I'm Abe Epperson. I'm just letting you feel it because you've been a jerk to me recently, okay?
Whoa! Recently meaning in the last 12 seconds?
Just a meanie boy. That's you.
I do apologize, but I like to reserve the singing openings for Kings of King because we don't want everything on the network to just be songs.
Just trying to bring the people happiness, get their swam quotient. You know?
Their swotient.
Yep.
And speaking of that, they're going to get their Teresient on this episode, which is their quotient of Teresa, because Teresa Lee is also here with us. Hey, Teresa.
Hello. I like Teresient. That's cool. It's almost like it sounds like it would be like in a museum to describe, like one of those cards to describe an old pot. Like this is Teresient, you know?
Ooh, yeah. You're like an old pot.
Thank you. I can't say how
your
flattered
words.
I am.
A vase that is reminiscent of Teresa's.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Oh my gosh. It's been way too long. Thank you so much for being here. And I got to say, you picked a movie that has so much emotional power in my life that I'm scared to talk about it.
I'm excited.
Did I gather from our email thread correctly that this is your first time seeing this movie?
Yes, it was my first time, and then I told my parents I was watching it for the first time, and then because then my mom was like, "Oh, I thought you saw it," but then watching it, I was like, "I know I haven't seen it." Like I've heard of it obviously, and I know David Bowie and I like his stuff, but it's like I just didn't watch it growing up. You know, when you like miss the chance as a kid, and then like it's not like a random one you watch for the first time with a group, unless there's a reason, you know.
I only watched this movie growing up. It's probably the movie I've seen the most times in my life. I watched it exclusively on Laserdisc many times a day, every day for many years in a row as a child. Obsessively.
I loved it, and I have to say I'm bummed I didn't watch. I feel like none of my friends know me well enough to have made me watch it. You know what I mean? It feels so me, and then I know a ton of people who liked it that I'm like, I had a totally different idea of what it was. Like, I don't know why, but I thought it was going to be very scary and like I think I got it confused with some other movie, but I thought it was going to be like a weird, scary, like Requiem for a Dream kind of trippy, like almost like druggy kind of thing. And it's not at all. It's a very delightful movie that I feel like helps you sort out emotions as a child growing up in ways that other movies that have tried to do it but are written by pedophiles have done, and I like this one better.
Right.
Jim Henson, as far as I know, is a goddamn angel.
Yeah. Well, I'm specifically talking about Alice in Wonderland. Like it gives me those vibes, and I loved Alice in Wonderland, but when I hear about Lewis Carroll, it kind of bugs me.
Or like C.S. Lewis or something like
Peter
that.
Peter Pan
like,
also has that issue.
Yeah. So I'm like, why did I not watch this one? This one kind of tells you to beware of pedophiles in a way. Like it kind of tells you to beware of everything.
Oh my gosh.
And trust yourself.
Okay. You're throwing
Here's
out,
what we've learned in Frame Rate so far.
So many intriguing threads. Yeah. Go ahead, Abe.
Yeah.
Okay.
Welcome, Teresa. So we've learned in Frame Rate that if you're a science fiction writer, you got weird views on the gays. And if you're a fantasy writer, you might diddle kids. This is not a great state of the union for writing.
I don't know, because I used to love writing fantasy and I love science fiction, and now I realize why I didn't watch any science fiction growing up, because I don't think their messages spoke to me, but I like the you know what I mean? Like I think underneath there is a darkness that maybe I picked up on.
Yeah. No,
so I didn't like that, and now I'm like, but I like the idea of science fiction. Like, is there like, let's just make the new stuff not weird and diddly.
I like Swaim watched the shit out of this movie, and I'm surprised that you didn't. Only because like most of the times, like I watched it a lot, but I watched it with like groups. Like it was it was like a main contender. Maybe it speaks to like what schools I was going to, but you know how you'd have like when at a certain point they wouldn't curate like the movie you watch during pizza parties or whatnot at school, that you reach an age where you get to choose, and it would be between like this, like Spaceballs, and like Monty Python Holy Grail.
Yeah,
which,
it's
to me, I guess maybe that's just I had a weird school.
I mean, like the Goonies is one I remember that was one of those that I do remember was playing a lot, but it happened to be I've never sat through the whole thing, and that's more like, oh, you know, it would be playing in this room, and then also people are flirting outside, so then I'd go flirt. So it's like I remember the Goonies was playing. It's like the flirt room, you know, but like, but this one I don't remember ever being like playing. So it wasn't until I grew up that I was like aware of it as a cultural thing.
Yeah, I mean, schools have their own memes in a way. You know, like someone shows a movie one time, and like when kids are 8, and then 12-year-olds and 13-year-olds are like, this movie is the jam. All of a sudden, it's like a thing in the school. So that's probably what happened.
Pre-streaming. I mean, honestly, it's like if you don't have the VHS, it's like it's not.
It's all word of mouth. Yeah,
you're not gonna watch it. So maybe that's it too.
Well, just different age. But yeah, I watched the shit out of this.
I love, by the way, how coy we're being about the movie title for no reason.
Oh,
so I'm going to get it out of the way and ask Teresa, of all the amazing threads we could pull on, the one I'm going to tug on first is you said, this movie is so me. It surprised you that you hadn't seen it because it's so you. What aspects of The Labyrinth are so Teresa Lee? Like, what resonated the most with you? And you're like, oh, I should have seen this 10 years ago.
Well, the first big theme of like, in order to go forward, you have to go back is a huge one. And then the biggest one that I took away that I've been thinking about all of quarantine is the idea of trusting yourself and of understanding intuition and being able to parse out and learn from your mistakes, as opposed to feeling helpless like a lost little girl in a maze needing the help of others who you have no idea if they have your best interest or not. So that really resonated with me, because I feel like, especially with things I've dealt with recently, I'm like, aha, yes, very true, good. And I feel like as an adult, I'm like, I wish I watched this as a kid, because then I would have maybe like remembered it when I was going through situations.
Oh, that's an interesting, first question is, okay, so I have a really weird take on this, but do you guys think Labyrinth is a strong, like, moral for kids? Because we live at a time where I feel like Pixar's almost refined this to a science, where you walk away going, wow, they really nailed a blend of like true wisdom that stays true. It's true for adults, but it's kind of cool and challenging to present to children. And it's almost mundane how much they knock it out of the park. It's like a mimetic joke that then you cry at the end and you're like, that was so true. And you leave the Pixar movie. But this, when Labyrinth came out, I feel like Jim Henson and Jim Henson Company were some of the most complex and like true, like I go, right on, man, like morals for kids. And I still think personally that the Labyrinth's the sort of thematic moral that it's on the surface going for, of navigating life's mazes. And the thing that really chokes me up is, we'll be here should you need us, as trite as it is, of like growing up is this kind of mourning of leaving the magic of childhood, but giving yourself permission to access those things again. That's, you know, it's not, there's no disgrace in it. So it's like finding that balance within yourself of maturing, but holding on to some of your childish things. And I really love that. And it's like, it is a mission statement for what Jim Henson did with his life, and Frank Oz and the whole crew is like, embrace imagination and childlike wonder and do what is frankly crazy, right? Like just make a bunch of piles of felt and do a show for kids. And it became this phenomenal empire that gives me so many warm, fuzzy feelings that I'll never not be nostalgic for. And I think Labyrinth, I'm probably biased, but it's like kind of the pinnacle for, I love the message of the Labyrinth. But then on the other hand, does anyone else think that it's about masturbating for the first time?
Well,
like,
that was a crack thing, right? That was Soren's today's topic.
Okay, well, can I respond to one thing you said?
Sure, please.
About it being, because I'm assuming when you say moral for kids, you mean as opposed to for adults, like it resonates more with kids. Is that what you mean? Like the?
Well,
okay,
I feel
so
like,
I would.
Yeah. Go ahead.
Well, the idea of growing up, I would present another perspective, having watched that for the first time as an adult. I totally think that's true because if you watch as a kid, that's the lesson you take. But for me, as an adult watching it, I don't think growing up is a thing that happens once. I think it's a thing that happens pretty prominently around our, like teenage, adolescent years. And that's why we always think of that growing up moment. I think I grew up in a different way during quarantine. And so there's like a second evolution and you're always evolving. But the big thing for me is not about letting go of your childhood or hanging on to magic. I took it more literally, like the voices are you. Like you walk around with, voices in your head, not like in a like literal way, but sometimes you're like, should I do this? Should I not? You have voices in your head. And as you get older, you learn which ones represent what parts of yourself, like the ego, the higher self, like the inner child. And you actually start to hear them as distinctive voices and you listen to them all and they all can be happy. So that's kind of how I took it, is like, I always have me wherever I go. And even in the parts I'm alone, I'll always have me. So I can always be like, hey, what would I do? And then talk my way out of a bad situation instead of feeling alone.
Yeah, there's always, I think everyone remembers as a milestone in their life that moment where you first develop the voice that always goes, nothing, tra-la-la.
Tra-la-la. Yeah. See, my take on it was that I agree with you, Teresa, that I think that it's not just for, like, I don't think the Labyrinth equal sign as like a representative concept equal sign her adolescence or like one child who is like a placeholder for all children becoming an adult. But I do think it is a larger conversation about responsibility and how it's easy because children are hedonistic and
as
always
to
about
adults?
it's like me. Yeah, that so it's easy.
I don't know about that one though, but I know
I
tons
don't
of
know
adults
many
who
children.
No, I feel like I know tons of adults who I would describe as way more hedonistic and maybe even in a damaging way because they actually know consequences and they're not just following their pleasure principle. They're purposefully hurting others to enjoy themselves.
Exactly. Just like Hoggle dusting out fairies at the beginning. Exactly right. And that's what I'm saying is that you can be adult and still take a lesson from the same labyrinth that, Sarah goes through in this movie is still representative to any adult. It's just her story is one of like, there's one moment where there's like the worm at the beginning of the labyrinth says, go down that way. No, not that way. And then go down that way to the right. And by the way, I this is the first viewing, even though I've seen it so many times. I only really got it because of screen direction, and I focus on screen direction. She chooses right all the time.
She always chooses right, and it's always the wrong choice. Which, by the way, in video games or like any maze I'm navigating, I always go left first. Left side, strong side.
Left side, strong side.
Well, no, I mean,
she's always correct, but it leads to a harder struggle. Is that what you mean?
That's the point, though. She learned, like, she wouldn't have. It's almost like she has to make all those mistakes to actually make the final right choice because it all led up to that moment. And the worm I really like that scene because I took it as like my first thought, maybe because I come in with an adult point of view. So I already maybe have learned some of the lessons, but the worm says, don't go that way. And she goes, oh, thank you. But she doesn't ask why, or she doesn't ask who are you or what do you want or why should I trust you? There's absolutely like as a child, there is a inclination to trust someone giving you instructions because that's what you've been taught. But as you grow older, you learn like, I am going to become a person who can give myself the direction. And she does that. So that's why she starts to question. But my first thought go ahead. Sorry.
Well, I just wanted to throw in there, the one thing I picked up was that I always picked up, I guess, is that when she goes right, which is the way that she was the worm was gesturing. Yeah. Like she's listening. But then the worm has an aside at the end that says, she should have gone the other way. That takes you right to the castle. Yeah. And I think that's kind of metaphor for the idea of like, you can know the answer and go there. You can cut through the labyrinth very easily if you have the answer. But the thing is, to learn. There's one thing about learning, like let's say responsibility, and then there's something about actually learning it by walking the path of understanding why it's like wise, and she learns all these lessons along the way. I just thought that that's an interesting kind of like setup for everything. Is that she just has only like 3 or 4 choices she really has to make, but ultimately it's just a way in which she's navigating the space that makes her understand and her change that she has to do something. And that's applicable to children, to adults.
I just thought of something that I want to say, and tell me if it's already a theory, because I know this movie has existed forever. So, like, definitely slam it down if it's already over talked about. But has anyone discussed about the idea of machine learning as it relates to this movie?
No, I've never heard of that.
So everything she's presented as a binary, which is very much how computers think.
True.
But it's not a binary in the sense of like a binary world, like when we're talking genders and things, because there are infinite possibilities and infinite solutions and infinite problems, but the one choice in front of her is always a binary, right? Go here, do nothing, do
up
something.
Up or down.
Yes.
This door,
and
that door.
And that is how computers
Left or
think.
right.
That's how computers think. And it's sometimes like the way that I've been thinking, because I've been trying to reprogram my own brain like a computer. And I think of it like, even if you don't know the answer, if you know where you are is not where you want to go, you make the best choice you can. And if they're equal, then just make a choice. And then if that choice is wrong, then you learn from that. And then the next one becomes easier. So the feeling that you have to make the right choice all the time is actually going to lead you to the wrong place, because you're going to, because you're going to ignore the warning signs like, oh, this person's not trustworthy, or like blah, blah, blah. And if you start to just trust your intuition, you can train your intuition. And that's what she does. So to me, I think it's actually a perfect example of how the human brain develops and how computers develop on a very, very like fundamental sense.
Yeah. I mean, it's how they tell you how to, like in game theory or not game theory, but like theory of games, when you're traversing a maze or a labyrinth, they say that the best way to do it, right, is to pick like right or left, and you hug that wall, so that way, if you always are hugging the right wall, by the end of it, you will
assuming the maze is static,
the maze doesn't move.
But you can't make those assumptions. But I will say you should be very clear about the assumptions you make, because it's smart to do that. If you assume it's static and then you're proven wrong, you know the moment it changed. And then you can go back and change it. So if you're not keeping track of, I mean, this is when I get really into singularity stuff. So, but I also think,
the wise sage does that. He says sometimes the way forward is the way back, or sometimes you don't think you're getting forward, but you actually are.
And I also, I realize another reason I like this a lot, and it's because a lot of like more adult movies, or even like the Disney villain movies, there always is like an antagonist. It's very black and white. When I say this is binary, it's not really about the villain. Like it takes more of a like a Miyazaki approach, where nobody's really evil and nobody's really good. And everyone has their own moral compass, and it's a little bit more of an accurate representation of like how to be a person in the world and respect boundaries. Like Hoggle or whatever, he is clear about not being trustworthy, but he does also have his like more, he does help her. So to me, that's like, there's no morality we need to assign to him. Like he's just trying to survive.
I would argue Jareth does fit the bill of being an antagonist, although it's unclear. Like,
no, he gives her what she wants in the beginning. So I would say he is her shadow self that actually helps her get what she wants, so that she realizes she doesn't want it.
I'm just arguing that his motives and his vibe are sinister. Again, to bring it back to the, like, man, I love how all the different things you're getting out of it, but I also want to reaffirm the vision of it from my childhood exists. Like, it still is about coming of age, right? Or is Jareth
about what?
Coming of age. Like, it also still is on the surface level about like, and I think one of the adult points that appeals to me the most that does come from Jareth is she says that's not fair. And like, I think this is something like you guys are talking about that a kid wouldn't really register, but as an adult really gets me. She says that's not fair. And his response ultimately is, you say that so often, I wonder what your basis of comparison is. Like, part of growing up is the realization that, like you're saying, there isn't a positive or negative charge to making the right decision or the wrong decision. If you make the wrong decision, you learn. If you make the right decision, quote unquote, the outcome you wanted happens, but you don't learn. So either way, it's a trade-off. And that is what coming of age is in some regard.
But I also think coming of age is a concept we created as adults to belittle children, because you're always developing. And the idea of coming of age is really, that resonates with me, that she's having a big change, but it's to me more the feeling of going from needing to rely on someone else for your safety to relying on yourself. And the baby represents that, because it's like when you're a child, you are helpless, but then she starts to have the ability to keep the baby safe. She doesn't want the baby,
right,
but she
taking
knows that baby.
responsibility for something outside yourself. I totally agree that like parts work is a thing. Like I completely agree that you mature in stages, but I think the genre in film of like coming of age stories is speaking to something true. Like I think there's a statistical, like if you graphed where parts of people mature in their lives, I think there's a band where a bunch of parts of you mature at once, right? And we call that coming of age. But you're right that line's very blurry, and people think, well, I'm an adult now, I'm 21, and that's certainly not the case.
I think it's mostly that societally we've seen that the visual cue of like developing your body developing through puberty, we say that's a signal point for us as a society to all go, okay, they can learn the adult stuff now. So we thrust them into that
Which
situation.
means responsibility for others, right? Like that's the ultimate adult thing that we are asking.
For herself. Okay, so I think you're all right about the coming of age body-wise. I think our society and films in the past didn't focus so much on the coming of age of mind. And I think that's why I like this movie so much. It does feel like it's a map, and that she comes of age of mind, which a lot of adults, some in government, have never come of age of mind. and we're surprised because they look like adults, but it's a part of it's a development. Like basically your not to get too into it, but the amygdala is what communicates between your prefrontal cortex and your limbic system. Children live in their limbic system. And as you get into your late 20s, your prefrontal cortex, which is like reasoning and all the new lessons you learn, that becomes way more active. And if you've developed properly, which I haven't, because trauma can lead to it being stunted. So I had that sort of growth really recently. And it made me realize, now I can keep myself safe. But for a very long time, a lot of my anxiety and depression came from a feeling of not being able to feel safe no matter where I went. And I think this movie addresses that. I mean, it doesn't get so in the weeds so it can go over your head, but maybe because of my recent experience, like it feels like they're addressing the coming of age of mind more than body.
But it does mention, like I'm saying, revelations like life isn't fair, life is dangerous, it's going to be a labyrinth. Yeah.
But,
and yet
there's
over
a
the
line
course,
at the very end when Jareth says, I have been generous. That part really caught me, because that would have gone over my head as a kid. I would just like, he sounds evil. As an adult, I can pinpoint that. That's like abuser behavior, right? It's a flat out lie. It's a pattern. He's straight up manipulating and saying something that's not true. But she catches it and says, how have you been generous? And she catches the lie. And a lot of adults don't catch that. Adults fall into that all the time. You'll say like, oh, how could you do this? I did this and this for you. But you know deep down that they don't want what's best for you. But because we've been trained to be polite or trained to take people at their word, we as adults fall into those pitfalls faster.
So that's what I'm saying is when he says I'm generous, he's gaslighting her, and you grant that. And I know this is a technical quibble, but so why don't you consider him the antagonist?
Because as a person, everybody is just trying to get what they want to feel safe. What makes him feel safe is, he's not right. He needs to find a better way, but that's his motive right now, is to feel safe. And that's what he needs to do. It's not correct.
But that's true of every
He's going out of his way to lie. He literally says,
because he wants
obey
the baby.
me and I'll be your slave. There's 100% of me is saying, no, he never thinks he's going to be a slave.
But do you think that in order to get where you're going, everyone who is in your way needs to not exist?
No, that's not what. It has to do.
Or could they find a way to exist? Right, but so he needs to learn his lesson. He's not going to get a baby by lying. But I think he wants a baby for reasons we don't get into in this movie. But I'm sure it ties back to some feeling of needing to nurture or whatever. And eventually, maybe if he fails enough, he'll try something different, right? He'll try a different binary. He'll try the other path.
I gotta say, wouldn't any film villain and real life villain always, if you could like interview them, say that they had reasons, you know, like Hitler just wanted a baby, so to speak. But that doesn't make him not an antagonist.
No, because in the movie, his getting his goal does not really affect her. I mean, in a way, yes, but he's not like. It's hard, like in Miyazaki films the same way. There are antagonists who are stopping you from getting your goal, but you don't need to vanquish them to achieve your goal, which she also doesn't vanquish him to get her goal. So
that's true.
That's
no,
more what I
he's more
mean
like a living monkey's paw or a genie.
Yeah.
Like your problem is you wished upon him in it. Be careful what you wish for.
Well,
okay, so can I tangent and do? Oh, go ahead.
Can I say one final thing? Because I want to hear your tangent. And I
course.
want to hear how it affected your childhood. But one thing I forgot to bring up that I feel like you guys will appreciate as filmmakers is it's so obvious, but as a kid, I don't think I would have realized that. But she talks about the Goblin King when she's looking in the mirror, which is, whatever, classic shot. But that's also why I picked up that it's her shadow self, because she's talking to herself, kind of like, this is what I really want. Like, life will be good if I just have it my way. And then she fights herself. So that's why I view this as like a fight within herself, because of that whole mirror exchange.
Right. Yeah. I think that's right. I think that's right. I think
that's in there.
Yeah.
And we should point out a screenplay by Terry Jones of Monty Python. You mentioned Holy Grail earlier. So I think, or like if you're familiar with Terry Jones's writing, he's very into allegory and parables and fairy tales, but they always are pretty complex and adultified. So I think that's the strings you're pulling on are definitely there, which is why I don't think that it's impossible that there's also a very strong masturbation thread in here. And I just want to pull at that thread for a second. So I alluded to it before, but to be Bowie's advocate for a second, because Abe is right. I think Soren wrote today's topic with these details in it, but like, watching it through this lens, I saw so many more things because I haven't watched it since we did that today's topic. And it's like, so I made notes, so bear with me. But the first line is, give me the child, which, just speaking to impregnation and the idea of like coming of age physically is the idea of becoming fertile.
There you go.
Well, hey, come on feet is a very notable line.
Oh, and it's so hard to find the center. It's like
true.
how men can't find the clit. You're like, where is it? I don't know. It could be anywhere.
Like
Yes.
Labyrinth down there.
If you were casting something as the clitoris incarnate, it would be David Bowie.
Oh my god! But then that's so male gazy because that's just a joke. Everyone knows where it is. I mean, I hope.
All right, that's true. That's true. So the actual stuff is, because I'm bringing this up because I think it's actually in there. I think it was intended by one of the authors.
When
because
I masturbate, I call it a hoggle.
Like I'm saying, I think they had conversations about how much to tip this, and they decided to not tip it very much, but it's in there. And my evidence is opening line resonant in most films, give me the child. Of course, the mom says, and I think Soren mentioned this in his today's topic, like, oh, I'd be happy if you were having dates. You should be having dates at your age. So there's this theme of the late bloomer idea, and it's tied to physicality. The opening credits song lyrics, written and performed by David Bowie, are, no one would blame you for walking away, but too much protection, no love injection. So it's like, if you wear a condom, you won't get pregnant. That imagery is in there.
What's up with masturbation, though? Who's condom masturbating? I mean, no judgment, but like...
Well, okay, so I'll tie it together.
Okay.
I threw in some joke ones, but the real ones are, we pan over her, her like effects in her bedroom at the beginning, and much like the Wizard of Oz, we see that she has a doll that looks like Sir Didymus. You're like, Ludo was represented by the thing in her
the
thing.
Firewalkers.
If you look carefully, David Bowie's clearly her drama teacher at school, because
Jeremy.
In the yearbook, there's like, drama class wins award, and she's there with David Bowie smiling. So, and his name's Jeremy, and now he's Jareth. So the idea, and this makes total sense to me, like the movie works on this level, is that night when her parents were gone, she neglected babysitting her brother to jerk off to a fantasy about her drama teacher, and it was her first time climaxing alone with herself, and that was a big moment of growing to adulthood for her. And I actually think the movie totally works on that level, and it all tracks, although it is kind of creepy that it's written by just two old men. And
do you think
that's
it was
an
conscious,
underlying
though?
part of the story?
Because I would also
think
say
it is conscious. I think that's I think
the hands.
I
Remember
think
the
the
hands?
contact juggling is clitoral imagery. I think there's clues there.
But then I would argue you could kind of do that for so many things, because almost everything, if you really break it down and go past masturbation, like even the idea of trusting yourself and trusting your intuition, is this idea of finding yourself, which is could be a euphemism for masturbation, or it could be a way to describe, like, and now you're going really far in the past, but like the idea of like kundalini, or discovering the true full self, of actually putting all your energy together, which connects to the amygdala communicating between the parts of the brain, because you grow up segmented and then you put them together, and then all of a sudden you like come into your power. Come get it. And it's not just about pleasure, it's about reason. It's like you can use what you know about your own body and mind to then go through life feeling safe, finding your own tribe, being able to make the right judgments, choices that will put you in the best place. And all that you can learn from masturbating. And it's not just to get wet, it's to get through life and be safe.
Although she does get wet as the very first image in the movie, which I think Soren may have mentioned in today's topic as well.
He mostly dwelled on. I watched it before. He dwells on the hand tube, the oubliette, the hands where they all like
the
handsy.
hands, the latex hands.
It's a very male perception. Then
it's a male version of it. It's
because the fact that she just spent one night in climax, I'm like, I mean, I'd love to hear if that happened for any girls out there, but I feel like for most women, it's like a gradual, like. You're taking it and like, there's like, oh, well, this part lit up, and then you're like 25 and you're like, and now play the song, and then you play the whole orchestra and you're like, oh, I know the song now.
I don't think anyone's saying, or like, I'm certainly not saying, yes, a properly driven clitoris is like conducting a symphony.
Kind of. I mean, we're complicated creatures. We're like, I guess in that way it's a labyrinth.
A little like a labyrinth.
Yes.
This is what I'm saying. But I don't think I'm certainly not saying it's just about masturbation. I'm just saying, I think that as the whole coming of age, like, pie that they made, I think there's a thin layer of masturbation, sexual, becoming fertile. There's a baby, but you don't understand the link between sex and babies fully. I think that whole male gazy take on it is in there.
I could see that.
I just think it's in there.
Yeah.
It's there. Yeah.
I could see that. I also want to speak to the smelly pond, because I think the other thing I got from it, because I kind of saw the labyrinth as like a map of the brain.
Pond.
Well,
the Bog of Eternal Stench.
Right. The Bog of Eternal Stench. To me, like the labyrinth is like, you know, this is not just me. Like it's the map of life, but it's a more literally to me map. So I think your body is actually kind of a map of your life, because you know there's the idea of like your root, you know, being like the butt part and the poops and whatever, but it's not just like waste. Like, no, truly though, like it's like whatever, you know, what nourishes you also, it becomes waste and then goes back in the earth and nourishes. There's this sort of like rebirth and this idea of like the end is the beginning. And the stench, I honestly thought they were going to jump in and find on the other side there was the castle, but I guess they didn't go there. But I also feel like
I like that. Like you have to shoot the moon and give in to the shit to reach
that is included in the movie, though, in the Escher-esque situation, or like in that sequence where it's like Escher.
Yes,
she takes a leap of faith to find Toby.
Because
you're saying it requires giving in and letting go. Definitely. Yeah.
And then in that way, then Frozen's also about masturbation. No, but the bog to me is like kind of like the what do you call it? The part where your poops comes out of the large intestine.
Duodenum.
What's the part?
What's the part that your poops come out of? Their gut.
Isn't it the
butthole?
Either duodenum or butthole.
Well, the part, but internally, and I think the maze is sort of like the body.
Rectum?
Yeah, but the maze is the body, and she's not going. And even to the point where she's like pulling the heads off. It's like you realize your head is not, even though it's as a person how we communicate, it's not the whole thing. Like your hands are part of the body, and there's hands. Your heart, I don't know which part's the heart, but there's heart. There's all these parts of the body that she needs to figure out how to like get to communicate together. And so the only true way to get to the castle is for her to visit all the parts. She can't skip straight to the castle because then she won't know how the heart works or how the hand works or how the butt works. She has to figure it out. Just like insects. If you only know how one part works, you're not going to have fun. So there.
What are the rocks, though? Because the rocks come from the bog, right?
Yeah, the rocks.
Like Ludo's friends, the rocks.
The rocks
Maybe
that are friends.
chakras. I don't know. Maybe they're like chakras.
He's like a stone bender. He can just talk to rocks. That's just a thing.
That's just a thing. Well, that's kind of like Never-Ending Story was also big.
Where there's just magical offers.
But
all
you
the
do
time.
have that in
Yeah,
your
there's
body.
just
You
offers
have
like that.
like you've got like blood cells, you've got brain cells, you've got parts. And I do think the rocks to me feel like being able to kind of control your body a little bit, like you know being able to actually know what's going on and understand like every part of it and be in your body, like because then it does feel magical, but it's
I
not,
think it's
you know,
something about the maze about knowing thyself. I mean, that's like
Yeah.
kind of one of the tenets of the maze is to know where you're going, and that kind of presumes that you know who you are, or you're like they talk about how you need to like to go somewhere, you need to know a position and a vector, right?
Yes, and you are she
So-
made the maze in a way. So if you made the maze, even if you don't know where you're going, if you just let instinct take over, you'll find it. Because ultimately she made wrong choices, but her instinct was to be kind and friendly. So that is actually what got her through. It wasn't they're taking the
That
right
is,
place. It was
yeah.
being friendly. So
And not making assumptions like Ludo is a
Yeah.
monster because he looks monstrous.
so
and
the
stuff.
trusting yourself to me, I think it applies to masturbating too. I'll bring it back, Swaim. If you
I also
really
think
want,
it's interesting. Well, I was going to try to apply it to masturbation, but I think it more applies to the paradox of life and what you're talking about, or like the relationship to your own body or your own sense of self-identity or autonomy. The line that as a kid I always just thought, that's a weird line. It's probably just filler. Fear me, love me, do as I say, and I will be your slave. Do as I say, and I will be your slave is almost sounds like a paradox, right? Like
Right.
I'll
Yeah.
be my slave and I will be your slave. But I think that's actually now that I hear Teresa's take, I'm like, that line supports that take and is very interesting to me.
I think it's more indicative of Jareth as gaslighting, though. I don't think he ever
You think that's just
intends-
tipping his hand that he speaks double speak?
Yeah, because in my head, Jareth represents like someone who can mislead you down a path in this world. Like
But
he says,
that-
come here, I'm going to take something from you, and then you're gonna like you should thank me for making hardship for you. I think that is an abusive system. So,
but have you ever been in a situation where you lied to yourself and you didn't realize till later?
yes,
Oh, of course.
of course.
I think it's the same dynamic.
It is the same dynamic, but it's not what I'm saying. Like that's just a different thing.
I'm just saying
I
that,
agree with it. but-
And that encapsulates my relationship with my genitals.
Yes.
Do as I say, and I will
Well,
be
when
your
I
slave.
do it, I call it sleight of hand magic.
Oh my god!
I call it contact juggling, and I have a man do it by sticking his arms through my.
Do you guys want to
armpits
hear
from
my
behind.
theory?
Yeah.
Wait,
That I-
can I just
Yeah,
because we
you do
probably
it.
won't
You-
mention rocks again? I just want to
Yeah.
mention this conversation is turning out to be, which I always prefer, way more about thoughts and ideas than like IMDb trivia. But for due diligence, I always do round up the IMDb trivia. And there was one interesting one about rocks, which is that, you know, that moment where there's a rock where from one angle it looks like rocks and from another angle it looks like Jareth's face, which is
Yeah.
now called like a forced perspective or a split
Right.
sculpture. They invented that trick.
Oh.
That art.
They are credited
Yeah.
with inventing the idea
Jim
of
Henson and the artist.
a 3D
Cool.
object that you turn and suddenly it clicks and it's a sculpture. I just think Jim Henson is a god of imagination. Like it's
Which
crazy.
Someone
It's
must
amazing.
have
to
done
me.
it, but they like made it a point. They like
In the history of man, sure, but it feels like he originally also thought of it. You know, I don't
And
feel like he copied it from anyone. He thought
just
of
for
that.
recency, by like recency bias to think like, oh, that's existed forever, just assuming that, because I definitely did before I read that.
But a caveman could have figured that out. We don't know. Sure.
The most recent King Kong movie, the Skull Island, has that trick in it. It's the art of the tribes people who live like on the island, and like I just go, oh, it's that thing they do. Or there's like a production design title that's like a C and an E, and depending on how the light shines, et cetera, et cetera. It's all the same kind of idea of just like revealing your perspective.
I think the BBC4 logo was the same trick at one point. Yeah.
Well, I think it's apt art design because based off your point of view, something can be true or something can be nonsense. And that is literally the second thing she learns. Things do not appear to be what they seem in the labyrinth as she approaches Ludo and realizes he's a monster and everyone's beating him up, but she's like friendly to him because she's walking in with like this open mind. So that's one of her attributes. That
Abe, you had a thought that seemed like it had a lot of passion around it before I said
it's
that.
Just I thought it's funny and I've never heard it before. And I thought of it while I was watching it. I'll run it down real quickly. You ever wonder why Jareth isn't a goblin?
Like why isn't he a puppet? He's the Goblin King.
Because he has no power. That's the whole thing, right? He actually needs. That's why he wants a baby.
But how did he become the king of the goblins?
Why is he different from the rest of the? Why is he a goblin king?
He's tricked them. He's deceived them and himself. He doesn't have people who looks like him, and so he has to convince the goblins to follow him. But without them, he has no power. So he wants an heir. Right. So that he can.
So I want to unpack this idea.
Damn, you should write a novelized prequel.
Yeah, that's really
from
fucking
Jareth's
good.
Point of view,
I'm gonna
Teresa.
throw out there.
Yeah,
I want, I want to take that idea, and then I also want to put in your head the question of what's up with the junkyard, like the trash area, and I want to offer this idea in your mind and see how like well that thought thread goes. What if Jareth was a Toby? What if he was a baby that the goblins stole and took him to the labyrinth?
Maybe.
Because then the junkyard starts to make sense.
And here's
why.
Maybe he's trying to get Toby to replace him, and then he can finally be free.
I don't know.
That's like a Wizard of... Oh, that's like from Wicked, right?
If you notice, the junkyard is all stuff that is like from specific, very overly specific stuff to unique people. It's all the people stuff when they wish the babies away. Like if a mother or a father or a sister or a brother said like, I don't want this child anymore. It's their stuff. And it represents, and like, so Sarah must lose a part of herself, the childish part, in order to take responsibility for the child. That's why all of her stuff like gets destroyed. And like the lady's trying to like form another version of her by putting things on her back. If you remember that scene.
Ooh, I didn't even think about that. But the lady, I think, represents
you should become me, right? So we have that. And then I started to think about what if the goblins themselves are the people who wish the children, brothers, sisters away. And this is all their stuff they don't need anymore. Because over time they become inhuman and self-obsessed. This would make them, even on the team of allies like Ludo and Hoggle and stuff, representatives of possible psychological responses to ignoring their lives and like more socially, like I don't want to do the socially accepted pursuits, so I'm going to go to this fantasy world and I'm going to become a goblin basically, because even Ludo and even all, like, it's Wizard of Oz, right? She comes across egotists and cowards. They're usually self-possessed, even like what's his name, the fox. Or they're apathetic.
Or the guy
like
with
Hoggle.
the hat. He's incompetent. The hat's egotistical. Yeah.
Right. Exactly. And Hoggle even starts by saying, "Don't tell me I didn't warn you," with this like nihilistic attitude. Like he thinks that the labyrinth itself, like it's just gonna function and it's just gonna grind you up. And you're just going to get spit out like the rest of us. When
but do you think Sarah's immune to that, though? Because truthfully, just because we like her and she's the protagonist, we give her a break. But she literally
I think she just does all the right things.
No,
you think she's just the chosen one that breaks the cycle?
No, I mean, she literally does something bad and then has to answer for her mistakes. She wished away the baby, not once, but twice, and she did it.
But she
and then
says
she
you
immediately
have no more power
regretted
over me.
Well, I just mean in the beginning.
She's telling herself.
From someone else's point of view, it's like she wished the goblins waited for her to say the words. She did it. And then immediately she said, I
Yes.
didn't mean it. But she did. We know she meant it. We were there. She meant it. And then she changed her
takes it
mind.
back.
Yeah, but then wouldn't you argue that that's like not how the world works? You have to face the consequences.
I would.
It's just
I
life
would.
in the
I think
Brent.
that, but I would say also in a child's story that's something that they would focus on one thing and it wouldn't be perfect.
But
It's
everyone
just
has
the
those
thing-
moments, right? Hoggle has a redeeming
Yeah,
moment too.
I think that's good to point out. I wanted to do one last evidence thing,
Okay.
which is Hoggle sees Sarah for the first time. He says, "Oh,
it's you.
it's you."
Yeah.
And then when she specifically says, "I'm Sarah," he responds, "That's what I figured."
Yeah, huh.
Because I think Hoggle might know that this story has been looping. Like there's a time loop or something.
Ooh,
And
I
she's
love
always
this.
Sarah and she's always looking for Jareth / Toby.
But that speaks to my point of it's all her. So everyone inside you would know it's you.
Well, it definitely is because it's a world
It's
built of
Wizard
her
of Oz.
imagination. We all agree
Not
on
necessarily
that, right?
though, right? We don't know. Well, okay. I want to address Abe's
can
point about
disagree.
the baby because and the junkyard because you just gave me another insight that I think is different and interesting. Is that the junkyard represents this is when all my trauma training has come back in. As a child, you're supposed to naturally have that happen around this age, but as an adult, when I didn't have that, in my late 20s, I had that where I realized I was really getting stuck in, like, when you have trauma you haven't dealt with, it stays in your body and you do get brought into the past a lot. There's a lot of time travel where you're not in the present and you often get triggered or you suddenly like hang on to things like junk. But in order to be in the present and then move on, you have to actually let go, literally. So for most people, that's a natural thing to do at that age. So I don't think it's a story about trauma, but if you watch as an adult, it's a story about trauma.
It applies.
Yeah, but as a child, that's a natural part of growing up. So I think, Swaim, I realize what you meant now. It is about growing up. I think because I didn't have that experience growing up, it didn't make sense to me. And now I'm realizing that is how a lot of people grew up, and I grew up later. So I think that junkyard is like a representation of like the memories will always be with you and you are always you no matter what. You don't need the things.
I think that's right.
And I think her being a like woman, especially when there's so many men in there, I do think there is a mother tie in there.
Yeah, her
Can
mother
I
left.
Yeah.
Ask Teresa, because your takes are so precious as someone who is viewing it with fresh eyes. Can we talk about Chili Down with the Fire Gang?
Yes.
Because you might not even, I don't know if people know those are the lyrics, but it's the song
Oh
that
my
goes,
God.
Chili Down with the Fire Gang. And they all rip their heads
B-sides
off.
of Red Hot Chili Peppers. I have to say,
And when I was a kid,
Yeah.
I was obsessed with this movie, but that song was the one part I didn't like. It scared me. It made me weirdly uncomfortable.
Right.
Do you think it's like a
Teresa, what's
penis
your
thing?
take on? No, it felt
because I didn't. Do you think it's like a
instinctively-
castration sort of like symbology?
Two things. I think I was a little young for ripping your head off. Like they were saying, we want to rip her head off. That was just a little grisly for me as a kid. I was a little young for that. Also, the fact that it's weirdly, so we haven't even talked about this and we probably won't have time to go into it, but it's a masterful, obviously, it's a masterful achievement in like puppetry and the craftsmanship of how this was made, right? Chili Down in the Fire Gang looks shitty though. I think it, like the comping is bad, the green screen or however they did the
they
chroma
weren't
key.
Yeah, it's
great with the
strange.
blue screen.
So it looked
Yeah.
weird. It's about ripping a girl's head off, which I think I was young enough that was genuinely scary to me. And then also I think I instinctively understood that it is a structurally divergent scene. Like this movie is so perfectly made, and by which I mean traditionally made, that literally she says, or the goblins, I'm sorry, the moment that, and by the way, how chilling is this? I love it. But when the baby just suddenly stops crying, that
Oh,
is
yeah, that's a great
literally to
moment.
the second, the 10-minute mark of the movie. So this is
nice.
the kind of movie we're talking about. And so I think even as a kid, I understood that there's no place in this movie for the Chili Down in the
This
Wild.
is the
and
Oracle
Fire
moment,
Gang.
right? It's like the
What
Oracle
is that
moment.
moment? Why is it in the story?
Okay, I have some thoughts. First, I think you saying that makes me think that's probably, I didn't track it, but it feels like probably where it would be like the meeting with the Oracle, and what you're describing makes sense, like where it's sort of like this weird resting place. And I didn't really see it as castration, but you saying it was uncomfortable, made me think that. From a female perspective, it might be a weird like period thing, or menstruation thing, which could then be fit into this idea that it's divergent, because you only really bleed the first time once, and then it's different after that. So that would make sense. But I had a more surface reaction because I've been told by fortune tellers to watch out for fire, and then now I'm dating an Aries, and I've just like never been around this much fiery energy, and I'm like, wow, fire everywhere. So when I see fire, I always just think about that prophecy. I'm like, fire is going to be the death of me. I'm all water. I'm just like a water sign through and through with some earth, which is why I like the rocks. But when you view it like that,
rocks, friends.
Yeah, I think that it does represent stuff in the body. I don't know what they were going for, but my visceral reaction was like, oh, cool, like drugs and whatever and shit is like fun. And then also you got to just learn how to like have fun, but then like be like, I'm good. I'm going to walk away. Like
it might have been the nod to drugs. I think it might have been the nod to drugs, or I literally believe it could have been a craftsmanship challenge. Like a puppetry master or Jim Henson or Frank Oz realized they wanted to do a sequence where puppets had their body parts split apart, and they just wanted to do it.
But the dancing, I love the dancing. Like that part,
right? Maybe they just thought it was a great bit.
I got up and danced like in my room during this part.
I think you're both wrong though.
Okay,
great, because it does have a very structural, specific part in the tale of like the hero's journey.
Yeah.
And it is the time in which, after you've collected all of the people together, like the group, you have a unity built, you have to test the main character again. And this comes from like the Fergus myth. And it's basically trying to say, I think it's baser than that, because if you notice, their language is a lot about, there's a lot of, it's kind of actually fucked up, but it's 1986. There's a lot of like Jamaican language in it, like in terms of the accents and stuff.
Give them the benefit of the doubt. You're calling them out on that shit. Okay.
I'm calling them out in the same way that I'll call out anyone in 1986 for doing that kind of shit. But like, point is that what they're trying to say is that these are the threats. These are people who are going to take advantage of you if you are alone without friends, if you don't have like some form of self-protection. Like if you're going to go out in the world is sometimes fucked up like this. And that's what that's reminding her of, so that she can then double down on the methodology that she started, which is to befriend people that she like can be kind to, who will be kind back to her, and build this infrastructure that is AKA her life and her choices that are healthily made. She can abet that in any situation. It's a very waspy kind of.
And you think they just made them vaguely black voice guys?
Yeah, I mean that's like something of racism? Note. But I think it's ultimately what the Henson and them are doing is trying to say like, look, there's bad people out there, which I think is like, that's why I mentioned the black thing, because it's like that's kind of fucked up, man.
Well, I think that's why I always tried to think they can't mean that. So what's the point of this scene?
Ooh, I think the point is to remind us of the threats of the outside.
I thought that builds on what you're saying, Abe.
If you smoke pot, someone will rip your head off.
Yes, exactly. That is exactly what they're saying.
I want to add on to what you're saying, Abe, because maybe it's not the meaning of the oracle, but what you describe is very interesting, because she is alone and she has a threat, but you are forgetting a very important part, which is that she alone defeats them, not by chance. She does it by her smarts, which means that lesson is not real. The lesson that you'll be hurt if you're on your own is not real, because literally if it was real, that would be the end. So
I think that's the resolution.
Well, I take it then as that's the moment she fights herself. Like that, for the whole time, she kept asking people, where do I go? Where do I go? She never made a choice. That was the first time she was alone and had the friends, and we liked the friends. It's not like she needed to lead the friends. But alone as a person, she kept herself safe and got away. And after that, she realized she can keep her friends safe and herself, but she doesn't need them, but she can. That's the moment for me.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right about that. And like, just to get deeper into like into the woods mythos, the Parsifal myth, the Fergus myth, like all this stuff that's coming out of like that nonsense that is like the hero's journey. You can't look at these are all just tactics, right? So like her tactic, how she survives in this instance or like in the next instance, it's not in the face of the fact that she has friends, it's like, here's just another tool in her toolkit, is that she can also survive on her own.
Yes.
That's absolutely true. She does return to the group because that will be the most powerful thing that ends everything in the movie. It's like they lift her up. It's like even though she beats Jareth,
well, then she says, I have to do this on my own because that's the way it's done.
Right.
Yeah.
She then has that scene that like Michael was mentioning at the end where it's like, if you need us, we'll be here. So it's like, the strength comes from friends, but you are the strength.
Yes.
Like you are the tip of the spear, but we're also a part of the, the body. That's like kind of what the hero's mythos usually does. It usually comes from friendship, but you have to make the actual gesture, the jump yourself.
Yeah, I like that a lot because I think that's something that took me a long time to learn. But the idea that instead of when you leave a scary situation or fight like that, like with the fire, let's say, instead of seeing that as like, oh my God, I never want to be there again. Like, oh, I almost died. Thinking of it as like you survive, like thinking of it as you survive. Like I am a warrior. Like I didn't want to be there, but I survived and I won, which means if I was there again, I know what to do. I'm not actively going to go there again, but I'm no longer afraid of these fire people because I know what to do. I'm a warrior.
I know how to take care of them. You just kick their head off, and then you just take their head off.
When they take their head off, you very cleverly kick it away.
I think the tactic she actually employs in that one is more like a better description would be distraction. Is that these types of these weed people will get distracted if you like throw something down a path and they'll go, ooh, what's that? And then you can bail.
It's interesting that I'm thinking about the human body now. If it was a map, like what part of puberty that would be. I'm like, is it like the hair follicles she's pulling out of her armpit? Like, I'm like, what is this?
Everything's sleight of hand magic. let's just be fair.
Also, maybe, I don't know what Jamaican patois was in 1986 or 7, but I don't believe that the phrase chili down with the fire gang just sounds like something a really white motherfucker wrote.
Right.
Trying to be like,
Smoking weed, yeah.
what do you think brothers who smoke weed say? Chili down with the fire gang? I don't know, dude.
Yeah, we're the fire gang, man. We're the fire gang. Yeah, and we're just chilling down.
Yeah. It's, it's like... Michael Cera saying, I smoked it. I smoked a marijuana cigarette. And I love, you just don't get a kid's movie anymore. And it's all the wackiness of David Bowie, or it wouldn't have happened. But like where the lyrics to the songs are, no, all the song lyrics are bananas.
Yeah.
They have no business being in a kid's movie. I'll lay my love between the stars as the pain sweeps through. That's heavy. That's the lyrics when they're dancing in the bubble.
Yeah. Huh.
I'll lay my love between the stars as the pain sweeps through.
I think it's saying that there's a duality of opening yourself up.
Yeah, wait, that actually is very interesting. You have to give to get, and you have to get to give. If you believe in the idea that energy cannot be... energy physically can't be destroyed or created. If you have enough, you literally, in order to get something from someone else, you have to give up something from yourself.
Okay. All right, hotshot. Then I'm going to bring up the moment everyone quotes the most that we haven't quoted yet. We almost made it to the end without doing it.
Wait, can I guess? I have no idea what it is.
Okay. Well, first I'll let you guess, but my only question about it is...
19 guesses.
is you get one guess.
Is it
the question is, though, what does this bit of dialogue mean? Because you've had an answer for every bit of dialogue, and I'm trying to prove that some of this movie is just nonsense, because I really believe some of it's just nonsense.
It could be nonsense. Depends on...
All right, but first, what do you think is the most mimetic moment of this movie?
Now I'm like, okay, is it...
Nothing, tra-la-la, no.
That's close.
Hello? No, I'm just kidding. Okay.
We'll say some kind of labyrinth.
What?
Now I don't know. I'm really thrown off. I mean, I'm guessing it has to do with something she and Jareth said because they seem like the most pivotal people. But I don't know. Go for it. Tell me what it is.
Abe, will you do the obligatory with me?
I don't know. Oh, yeah.
All right. You remind me of the babe.
What babe?
The babe with the power.
What power?
The power of voodoo.
Voodoo?
You do.
Do what?
Remind me of the babe. Fucking everyone loves that moment.
Uh-huh.
And I challenge you to tie it to anything we've spoken about in the episode.
Interesting. I do remember hearing that and being like, huh. And then at the end, it sings it too. And I was wondering if it's some weird appropriation thing because they talk about voodoo. Oh, okay. Well, you remind me of the babe. So I think he's the babe. It's inner child work. It's simple. It's very simple. It's the idea of self-parenting, okay? It's when you feel that you are growing out of your the ability to have your own caretakers keep you safe. You have to reckon with the fact that they won't keep you safe, and they actually never have. That's the truth, because they're doing their best, but nobody is perfect. And in order to recognize that, you have to recognize that for most of your life, you survived by sheer chance, because the people who raised you didn't have the answers, and they couldn't keep you safe even if they wanted to. They just did their best, which is a very scary moment to realize. And that's when you could go either deep down and fall forever, or you can lift yourself up and go, you know what, but they figured it out and I'm alive, so cool. Now I have to figure out how to keep myself safe. And then you do that to your kids. You do the same lie. You lie to them again. You go, I know everything. I know what's best. And then at some point they have that moment and they're like, fuck, you didn't know. And the babe is the moment when you didn't know and things were good and you felt safe. So he's reminded of the babe, what is the power of voodoo? It's magic because it was an illusion. Nobody is perfectly safe, but you need to feel safe in order to keep going and make a choice. Otherwise, you'll be paralyzed by your limbic system because it's fight, flight, or freeze. There, did that work?
I think it's close. I have another answer,
Okay.
Another possibility, Michael, which is, all right, so Jareth is talking to a goblin, right?
Okay.
Right.
You remind me of the babe. What babe? The babe with power. What power? The power of voodoo. Okay. So,
is this going to go into your theory about he's going to morph into a goblin later?
Maybe. No, that's a very good point. I mean, he does at one point look at the baby and say, like, you have my eyes. But the thing with the babe and the babe with the power is that the power of babes is like imagination. And I think that's what he means by voodoo. And I think that
I do think there's something real in this movie about the magic of imagination, for sure.
Exactly. And innocence in particular, innocence/imagination.
But
because I think it comes from babes, the power of babes, the mind of babes, where like you have a twinkle in your eye that is unique to children, which is because you have not, like, life has not battered you down yet. Because there's that little look in your eye, like you're excited about something just for like the thrill of, like, I don't know. That's why we like imagination. Just for the thrill of it, just to imagine it. That is the end. It's not a means. It's just an end in itself.
Also, well, if your thing is that the labyrinth is a time loop, you remind me of the babe. It starts and ends with you remind me of the babe. So it is a loop as well.
Yeah. And the thing is that this is the moment when he's looking, it's actually, I think the tone of the song, if this is the interpretation of the song, I'm not saying it is, it could be nonsense, you're probably right. But if this is the interpretation of the song, it doesn't fit with like the kind of upbeat tone of the song itself, because the song, this is actually, would be, if you look at under this interpretation, if you look at the rest of the lyrics of the song, this is Jareth saying to his own goblin horde, like, she's winning. She's winning. All of you are assholes. Like,
right.
You're just like, well, I'm trying to
what
like
kind
knock
of
her down and
spell
beat
to use?
beat the imagination and like children from like, I'm trying to do this thing over here, and you guys are falling in love with her. You guys are falling in love with this little thing that she's doing, which is imagining her way out of the situation, kind of thing. It's complex because she's also trying to defeat that part of herself. Not defeat it, but I guess like move on to the next cycle of life.
I bump against this
yeah.
idea that imagination is a power for kids, because like not only do we all work at a place where I would say everyone is very imaginative, and it wasn't like something we in spite of did, like I think we're also functional adults. I think that's one of those lies adults say, that kids have imagination, and I don't think it's imagination at all. I think it's literally your brain creating answers for questions you don't know, and as you get older and you know answers, you replace them with answers, but the imagination's part is still there for you to seek knowledge. But the part we stop listening to is the part that needs more knowledge, because we assume all the knowledge has been found, which is not true. And as a child, because you haven't been taught it's been found, you keep looking. That's what I think imagination is, because it's this idea of creating a solution when there is none. But we have that power as adults. We just forget that. Like, that's why we do stupid things like, vote for centrist or whatever when we think that there's no other way, because it's like, there is.
That's amazing.
Literally, we all have it. We literally never gave up our imagination. We just learned some information and decided to stop learning
It's a very
more.
transcendentalist take on it. I'm just citing. All I'm saying is like it's very what's his name? William Blake, Songs of Innocence, Songs of Experience. It's that classical version of it, or that romantic version. Like saying that that's what children are and that's what adults are. I'm not saying it's right. I'm just saying that that's like the framework in which fairy tales usually occupy. They usually kind of start with the assumption of like, for example, if you're evil, you're usually pretty ugly, right? In these tales, if you're a witch and you got like pimples, you're probably
Or tropes
gonna kill
like
some
that.
kids.
The symbology is clear.
Yeah.
But yours is more of like the woke, myth.
Well, all I can say is both of you are much smarter than me, and this really makes me want to do a whole podcast series where I just mediate. Hey, what about this scene from the Labyrinth? And you give completely wildly different takes on it.
What's up with the dog, though? We never talked about that. There's just a dog.
The Merlin.
Wait,
it's
you
the
mean
same,
Didymus?
Yeah. Well,
It's Toto. It's Toto.
no,
It's
but I
just
mean that
Toto.
everything's a weird like creature, and then we just get a dog.
The fact that that Didymus rides a real dog.
Yeah, it's just a dog.
I thought it was almost an allusion to the classic Goofy Pluto question, where they're like, it's like it's a wink to the fact that, look, they're puppets. So if we put in a real dog, because that's funny, right? There's a
it's cute
puppet
as
dog
hell.
riding a real dog. That's cute as hell.
It's cute as hell.
Again, I would argue that a bunch of stuff in Labyrinth were just crafts choices that didn't mean anything, but that's why I want to do a series where I just force you guys
you force us
to
to
fill
answer
in
nonsense.
as if it did mean
That's
something.
not for anybody.
Yeah.
that's a dumb thing. No, it's two things. It's cute as fucking hell.
It's cute.
Two, Merlin. It's Merlin.
The dog's name is Merlin.
The dog. The dog at the beginning, which is Jennifer Connelly's Sarah's dog in real life.
Right.
It's doing the same thing as when we
Toto
look
is
at her
in Wizard of
room.
Oz. You got to incorporate your pet because they're in your memory.
Yeah, it's like, okay, you represent this, but Toto is like literally 1-to-1. It's like I have my dog, and like when I go into this fantasy dream world, it's still the same dog.
That maybe is saying more than we realize. Is children and animals actually have more insight into the world
Constancy.
than
They're
we
more
know.
true.
Yeah,
Another case for why Jareth is Toby. All I'm saying.
What would? Oh man, I really think there is a Wicked style story here about how the Labyrinth functions and all the detailed mechanical mystical lore.
Right, like what? How is it? How was it built? Who built it?
Yeah,
You know?
to what end? Like Jareth's
Is
whole
he the first
backstory?
Goblin King?
God, I just want David Bowie to still be alive, you guys.
Oh,
Also-
I wish we could hug at this point.
Yeah.
If it's a
But we
time
can't.
loop someplace, he's alive.
He's
Yeah, I
alive
think
in that
there's-
bubble.
Yeah.
And then that bubble bursts, and you fall from the masquerade and into an Escher-esque stairwell dream. Classic
You
stuff.
smack against the hard reality of a codpiece that we all
What would
must
you do
face
if you
someday.
at the
I'm
end of
just remembering middle school.
what would you guys do if at the end of your like if literally like at the end of your life it's like, okay, we're done, and then it is David Bowie as the Goblin King, like, surprise, the meaning of life was this, and then like would you be like, oh my god, like it'd be because it's like it's funny, but it's
Yes.
like if that actually happened, be like, oh, now it makes sense. You showed us this movie so that we would know.
I'd be like, I see. You took a form that would be most pleasing to me. I would assume that was a tailored image for my benefit, and God appears differently to
It
different
could be
people.
however you want. You're right. It doesn't matter. Believe or not believe. You would never
Believe
know.
or not.
You would
That's
never know.
that's what, see, I would immediately be like,
Let's
you remind me of the babe. And then get him to say what, babe? And I say the power. the babe with the
Oh,
power.
you would do the bit
So
with
I'd
him.
turn it on him.
And he'd be like, do you have any idea how often I get this? I'm sick of doing this with fans.
Yeah, and
man.
I'd be like, that's
God.
Like, hoodoo? That's it.
Well, it's the pause where we all feel like we should hug, but we can't. So I think that's an
can't.
episode.
That's
This
kind
has
of an
been so
episode.
fun.
Teresa, What have you been working on?
What an incredible
recently
take
that
on Labyrinth.
Yeah.
What have
I always loved having a chat
plug.
with you.
We're sloppily
sure.
transitioning into plug time.
You could follow me, I guess, if you want to hear my deranged thoughts, at Teresa T on Twitter. I did start an OnlyFans to talk about the singularity and get into more like old diary entries and write poetry. It's all of this stuff, but like much less funny because it's like me being like, now the brain, this is how it works. Time is an infinite loop. So if you like that, if you like that mushroom video from Cracked, it's a lot of my real thoughts without punchlines.
Aries need not apply though, right? You ban all Aries.
No, I mean, well, I unfortunately love an Aries, so
I love Teresa so much. She's like, she gets me, but her astrology takes, I'll never get it. I'll never get it ever. I'm a water sign too. I don't get it.
You don't get astrology? Like, I mean, doesn't it make...
I just don't, and it's just something we're going to disagree
I'm
on.
going to say what? Can I say one thing?
Can I
say one thing?
Best friend. Yeah.
I'm going to say one thing. You don't have to like agree, but just imagine the
Fuck
human...
you, Abe. I'm out.
The human fetus developing and all the cells where your heart is, where your eyes are, it actually determines what the function is, the organs and things. Why would it be so different that where you were born on a planet Earth, which is a body, if you think about it, Mother Earth, would be affected by the location?
Because they're so far away. The stars are
where's
so
your eye in
far
relation
away.
to your... I mean, like, where is your, like, a tiny blood cell in the middle of your heart in relation
Not
to...
that far.
Oh, no, you started as a sperm and an egg. I'm just saying, you used to be a little cell.
You know what? It's fine. It's fine. I love it. I love you. You're amazing. I want your energy all the time. It's great. I can't.
Okay.
I can't go down this road with
I
you.
concede. It's okay.
Yeah, I concede too.
I respect your
We all
boundaries.
concede. Exactly. There we are. But I love talking to you for content reasons, I guess. All right. That's a sode, right?
I think so.
Thanks
Thank
for
you.
Let us
having me.
in on this. Don't tell me truth hurts, little girl, because it hurts like hell. This has been a Small Beans endeavor. We're a bunch of pals who make podcasts, sketches, music, web series, and movies. The beans always have new ideas percolating, so make sure to check us out at patreon.com/smallbeans. That's patreon.com/smallbeans, where you can browse all of our current and past content, see what we've got planned in the future, and learn how your support can help the small beans grow into huge, giant monster beans. If you enjoyed this content module, please like, rate, subscribe, or tell a friend about us. We love you!